Alright, today I'm going to be debunking a video made by breadtuber non-complete. I don't really know much about this guy. Let's just get right into the footage. Oh yeah, I just wanted to say, the absolute hubris of these people to make a video that says capitalism sucks, when capitalism has done so much for so many people, allowing billions to enjoy just incredible standards of living. It's the greatest thing to ever happen to this planet, and these people are making a video trashing it from the luxury of their homes brought to them by capitalism. It's just so absolutely. These guys have no idea about anything. They're just idiots.
It's a great thing, right? Capitalism leads to technological advancement, economic development, and human freedom. That is, until it doesn't. There's no question that the development of capitalism was a great thing for human society. Unfortunately, over time, capitalism rapidly from a force for positive social change into a brutal system of oppression that's holding humanity back and destroying billions of lives. To understand why, let's first take a look at the system which preceded capitalism.
Yeah, that person earning £4 a week isn't in a capitalist country. And this is what they do. Every bad thing in the world is capitalism to them. It's so disingenuous. The capitalist nations are Canada, the United States, France. Nobody's making $4 a week there because we've had capitalism for so long that we've had capital accumulation, which made labor more productive. To the degree that these countries where people are making, $4 a week, or that seems low. Outside of sub-Saharan Africa, not sure anybody's making that. But people are making $10 a day or whatever. There's about 1 billion people, I think, making less than $1 a day. So the reason why these countries are so poor is because they haven't had capitalism. They haven't had a society based upon private property rights with the rule of law. Look at India. They adopted all these socialist policies, and it set their country back decades. Now, as they liberalize, their economy's bigger than Canada's. The 4 trillion GDP just shows to go how capitalism is so good.
Feudalism. Back in the days of feudalism, society was agrarian. The most important product was food, so the most important means of production were farmlands. At the top of feudal society were the feudal lords who owned the land.
So there's actually a bit of a debate over what exactly feudalism was in the academic community.
At the bottom were the peasants who worked the land. There were other classes too, like the church and merchants and tradespeople like stonemasons and cobblers and coopers. There was friction and conflict between these classes from time to time, but for the most part under feudalism, society was pretty much static for hundreds of years, especially for the peasant class. Under feudal society, if you were born a peasant, you were probably going to die as a peasant. You were essentially the property of your feudal lord, so there wasn't much opportunity for advancement or changing careers. It sucked. The other classes were pretty static too.
I don't think it's accurate to say that peasants were all slaves of their feudal lord.
Noble titles were passed down from father to son, and there were very few opportunities to break into the aristocratic class. Merchants and tradespeople formed powerful guilds to prevent competition and to control access to their professions. Under feudalism, the people in power did their best to restrict and control social mobility. As capitalism began to emerge hand in hand with industrialism, things began to change. Early capitalists gave peasants opportunities they never had before. Now, instead of toiling your life away on a peasant farm for a feudal lord, you could go to work for a capitalist in exchange for wages and try to advance your lot in life. As capitalism progressed, the old social order of...
So that's not exactly right. So what happened was this. When the factory system first got introduced in England, there was a massive growing population. And And there was no jobs for these people, not even working on a farm, as the video sort of says. The economy was too rigid. Basically, everybody had their spot in the economic order, which is sort of what the video was talking about earlier. So there wasn't any dynamism. The economy couldn't adapt, and because you had increased production and you had a massively growing population, all these people ended up just being objectively poor. Some would go off to be pirates or other types of criminals, but most were just languishing in abject poverty. And that was when the miracle of the factory system came around. These people didn't have jobs before. It wasn't that they had bad jobs on a farm. They had nothing, no hope. And so the factory system at least provided them with this little bit of hope. And they could earn an income. It was very meager at the start. Often the whole family would work, including the children. And slowly but surely, people would start reinvesting their income and building more factories, and production. The total output of England just took off, like a rocket ship, and that's what led to England becoming the richest country in the world in the 18th and 19th century.
Feudalism rapidly fell to pieces. Feudal lords were usurped by wealthy capitalists who owned land and factories. The ancient craft guilds found that they couldn't compete with modern industrial production. And the newly formed working class developed a degree of social mobility as they could move from job to job trying to seek higher wages. This all sounds pretty great, right? Well, it was for a while. Unfortunately, the good times did not last. Over time, capitalist processes lead to increasing economic instability, inequality, and societal destruction. To understand why...
No.
Let's take a look at how capitalism functions. Under capitalism, all of the old classes of lords and peasants and craftsmen and merchants have been swept away. Now there are basically just two major classes: the capitalists who own the means of production, the factories and farms and other businesses of the world, and the workers who perform the labor that keeps the wheels of the economy turning.
That's absurd.
Capitalists not only own the means of production, but they also get to keep a significant cut of whatever the worker earns or produces in the form of profit. Basically, capitalist bosses steal labor value from workers and transfer that wealth to themselves.
False. The way that profits are obtained in a market economy is through doing a better job of forecasting consumer demand than your competition. People make money not by squeezing it out of their workers, but by producing stuff that people want to buy.
In order for capitalist institutions to survive, they have to turn a profit for the capitalists who own them. Otherwise, they'll be forced out of business by more ruthless competitors. Capitalist institutions literally can't concern themselves with anything but profits, or basically they'll die. Nearly all of the efforts of human civilization are now yoked to the will of capitalists who own the factories, the financial institutions, the mass media, the social networks, the tech companies, the medical and pharmaceutical companies. They own everything.
Yeah, this is ridiculous. Okay, under capitalism, what happens is the factory owners reinvest the profits they make into more capital, which capital means, by the way, man-made factors of production. This makes the workers more productive, the factories more productive, more stuff gets produced. So you see this sort of steady increase in the standard of living for the workers. Things keep getting better, constantly better.
So they get to set the agenda for our society. And what kind of agenda do capitalists have? Well, it's actually really simple. Capitalism steers humanity toward one end and one end only: ever-increasing profits for capitalists. See, capitalists don't really care about the wealth.
So, the only way this could become a problem is when government enters the picture, because how does a capitalist make profits? As I said, it's by producing something that people want to buy. That's in the market economy. So if they really, really want to make money, they've really, really got to produce something that people want to buy. That's not a problem. That's a great thing.
Welfare of workers or protecting the environment, they can't because those things aren't profitable.
Okay, that's simply not true, especially when it comes to, well, as I've already said, workers' wages rose quite rapidly under capitalism. During the Gilded Age in America, a single decade saw industrial workers' real wages increase by 48%. And that was the story throughout industrialization, which is why workers' wages are so high today. So no, that's untrue. That's completely historically false. And then working conditions also constantly were improving. That's basically the same thing as your wages rising is working conditions improving, or at least that's a trade-off that you make. But that's one way that firms attract workers. They can offer higher wages or they can offer better working conditions. Workers are going to go to where they're paid the most or where there's the best balance between safety and salary.
Capitalism doesn't allow for businesses to be driven by ethics or morals or scruples. Only building profits will allow a company to survive. Anything that reduces profitability is inherently harmful to a capitalist entity. Sure, sometimes profitability does line up with good causes. Sometimes it's cheaper to be more environmentally sustainable, for instance. Or maybe donating to a charity will net a big fat tax break for the capitalist. Or maybe it's just good marketing.
No, I don't think you understand how tax breaks work. You only get to write off a certain percentage of what you give, so you're not going to make money by giving money away.
To support a worthy cause. But this is all just incidental. Don't be fooled for a moment into believing that capitalism cares about the welfare of society.
Capitalism's an economic system. It doesn't care. It's not capable of caring. Only individuals can care. An economic system cannot care.
It's all about the profit. Keep in mind that there are only two ways to increase profits. A company can either increase prices for consumers or reduce costs.
That's completely false. This guy has no idea what he's talking about. You don't even understand the basics. You're not even. They can just sell something that people want to buy. It's that simple.
Competition tends to put a hard limit on what a business can charge, so as businesses become more powerful, they will always seek to eliminate competition and create monopolies so that they can charge consumers as much as possible to max.
So, during the late 19th century, early 20th century in America, there were conscious efforts to monopolize a number of industries through mergers. These were called the trusts. And despite obtaining very high market share in some cases, for example, Rockefeller had like almost the total refined. He had total his part of the market anyway. I don't know what it was. He was selling refined oil or something like that. He didn't have total control over the oil market, but he had basically total control over some subset of the oil market. And U.S. Steel had like 65% of the steel market. And there was trusts in a number of different industries. But despite all these mergers, despite these conscious efforts to monopolize the industry, and they were trying to monopolize, prices actually kept falling and output kept increasing in the industries that they were monopolizing and cartelizing faster than the general fall in price levels at that time. So despite these conscious efforts to monopolize, they were unable to charge the so-called monopoly price. And the reason is, even if you had, 70, 80% market share, You try raising your price, and some smaller competitors just gonna undercut you, and consumers are gonna go with that smaller competitor, and he's gonna grow, and now you have a problem. So even if you have you achieve a monopoly, you're the only seller in town, you raise your price, people can just join that market. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. And historically, it's never been the case that a company's managed to use predatory pricing to undercut their competition and then corner the market and charge abusive prices. The only time you can get away with charging the monopoly price is if you have a grant of monopoly privilege from the state that prevents other companies from entering your industry. The other thing that can happen is if they get the assistance of the state, then they can use that to help cartelize. For example, one of the checks on cartelization is the ability for cartel members to secretly undercut the cartel, right? Because there's going to be a huge temptation if you're a member of the cartel. The price is driven artificially high because you're restricting output for you to say, well, the market price is 5, the cartel's price is 7. You can make a lot of money if you start secretly selling at $6.50, and the customers are going to want to buy. So you say, don't tell anybody, this is a special deal for you, And so that's how cartels are broken just on the market, just in the self-interest of the firms. But now, if the state is to mandate that everybody has to publish their prices, then that check on the cartel is broken.
Maximize company profits. When it comes to driving down costs, the primary cost for almost every business is human labor. As such, capitalist businesses are always seeking to pay workers as little as possible or just
and yet wages have increased. Wages have been steadily increasing since capitalism. So these guys are regarded.
Eliminate them through things like automation to drive down wages as much as they can get away with. Naturally, this leads to tremendous accumulation of wealth for the capitalist class and ever-increasing wealth inequality between workers and capitalists. By definition, capitalism will always lead to the rich getting richer and the poor getting way more poor.
The poor today are so much richer than the poor yesterday. I don't have any idea how this guy can make such obviously false claims. Shame on you. Shame on you.
A lot of folks try to argue that capitalism can be reformed, that capitalists can be restrained through regulation and legislation that would put limits on the abuses capitalists can make to the people of the world and to our environment. This liberal position cruelly ignores the fact that even the most effective regulations and reforms do nothing to correct the power imbalances of society. Any such reforms are destined to be inadequate because they don't disrupt who ultimately holds the power in the system. As long as capitalists hold the reins of the means of production, they will always hold virtually limitless power over society.
Not true. Capitalist business owners must produce what people want to buy, or they go out of business. So who really holds the reins? It's the consumers.
Another major myth about capitalism is the idea of meritocracy. Capitalist propaganda seeks to convince us that hard work and good ideas...
If the capitalist economy is not a meritocracy, how do you explain the Horatio Alger stories? People that came to America, they had nothing, or no, they had nothing. They had the clothes on their back, and they go on to establishing vast fortunes, billions of dollars. How do you explain that if it's not a meritocracy? They're just lucky? Come on.
Will rise to the top, and that anyone can become a rich capitalist if they're willing to play the game. Unfortunately, that game is severely rigged, such that for every worker who does manage to break into the capitalist caste of billionaires, there are millions of workers who suffer and toil in misery from the cradle.
Again, these people that he's showing here, they're not from the capitalist countries.
To the grave. Some folks say that if we got rid of capitalism...
And to the degree that companies are going overseas and offering employment in the third world, they're doing a good thing. They're creating economic opportunity where none exists, and yet socialists, like the creator of this video, would condemn them for that.
Capitalism, universal laziness would take over society and nobody would work anymore because there'd be no incentive. This position ignores the fact that in capitalist society, the people who work the hardest make the least amount of money, and the people with the greatest fortunes,
You get paid in capitalism relative to how much you contribute to the productive process, not how much you work. Work smarter, not harder.
capitalists live out their days in luxurious laziness. Capitalism is an engine that robs wealth from the working people of the world and transfers it to a small number of capitalists who feel entitled to our money. It had
Our money. Capitalism has created more wealth, has lifted more people out of poverty. It has delivered on all the bullshit promises that socialism made. Even lower income people in first world countries live very nice lives because of capitalism. And yet every time socialism has been attempted, it has led to abject misery, poverty, and death.
At its time and place in history, it was admittedly a great step forward from feudalism, but it's outworn its usefulness, and now's the time for capitalism to be dismantled so that humanity can fulfill our true potential. There's a lot more to be said about capitalism.
No thanks. You want to go enjoy the workers' paradise? You go move to North Korea or Venezuela or any of the other commie crap holes. We're gonna stick with capitalism. Thanks, bud.